Here Hardy and Michael Ford are coming. Ellen Wilkinson, the red flag, she is humming. We get around not as much as Dominic Cummings, even though he's driving blind. We are the Labour grassroots, where like-minded folk dwell. From countryside to city, it's warm and it's witty, the antidote to Pretty Patel. We are the Labour grassroots, time to raise a racket. The future is as bright as Crispin's red jacket. This is the space where we all go hell for leather, free from all the biased BBC blether. Like track and trace, we're better together, just ask Carrie and Meg. Yeah, we got all the people from Inverness, Skegness, Barrow, Inverness, Chester, Leicester, Cirencester, Shrewsbury, Oswestry, Swansea, Bernackley, Barnsley, Beccles, Nottingham and Eccles. We are the Labour grassroots, time to plant some grass. Where we've always had social distancing between us and the upper class.
We've got a very busy show today. We've got a discussion on the General Secretary's decision to stop people talking about Jeremy Corbyn. But before that, we have our newspaper review. Without much further ado, I'm going to introduce our two newspaper reviewers. Firstly, in Harrow in northwest London, or are you there, Pamela?
I am, thank you, Crispin. Hello, everyone. Good to be back.
In another part of London, I think it's in Hackney, we have David Osler. Are you there, David?
Yeah, I'm there. Good morning, Crispin. My God, that jacket.
Yeah, I've always got a jacket. It gives me status. Right, okay, so the first story, something's been going on in the news in the last few days. I don't know if you noticed it. There's this guy here, Joe Biden, has come into the frame. There's loads of stories about him and the election and whether it was rigged or whether Trump's going to blow the fuse or whatever it is. What I'd like to know is what you think the repercussions are for Joe Biden becoming president. So what's your thoughts on this, Pamela?
Well, obviously it's great that Trump's gone, but we've all got to kind of remind ourselves why Trump got there in the first place, and it was the policies of Trump's predecessors. So it may be a temporary reprieve. Let's, hope that there are some more sort of progressive policies rather than what went before Trump. I think also it's such a narrow victory. It's a real warning to us in the UK about what's needed. I think if Bernie Sanders had been the candidate, it may have been a more resounding win for the Democrats. I mean, it worries me that they're going to continue with policies of austerity that will impact on working class, ordinary people, and that will have Trump Mark II, or son or daughter of Trump, in the next election. But I would say it is quite interesting that Biden is managing to look like Che Guevara in comparison to what's going on in the UK, with some of the policies that he's mentioned seem so radical compared to our own. And that's a sign of the times in the UK, I would say. So yes, glad Trump's gone, but I've failed to get excited by the election of Biden, I'm afraid.
David, are you excited about Biden?
Well, look, there's always joy on the British left whenever the Democrats beat the Republicans to the White House. I'm old enough and ugly enough to have seen it before with Clinton in 1992 and with Obama in 2008. But let's not forget, the Democrats are far from a Labour Party in our sense of the word. They're not even particularly centre-left by European standards. And it's also worth bearing in mind that Democratic Socialists of America, perhaps the closest people politically to the Labour left in this country, didn't endorse Biden. I'm not even sure I'd have voted for him unless I lived in a swing state. So, yeah, the message is, yes, let's be glad that Trump is gone, but, you know, American comrades should keep working for a socialist organisation in America, and British comrades should keep working for a socialist organisation in Britain.
And that's a great link to the next story that was in the Morning Star. Ian Lavery's written an opinion piece about the bland bureaucratic centrism. He's got a picture there with Biden next to Keir Starmer. Pamela, do you think there's any connection between Biden and Keir Starmer?
Yes, absolutely. I think we should learn a lesson from it. I mean, we keep hearing about the defeat of 2019, but what is not mentioned is that we were hemorrhaging our core support from 1997. And because people felt that the party had abandoned core working class voters, they felt alienated. And the only time we got anywhere near restoring that support for Labour was in 2017. There was a bit of a kind of increase in 2015, but really in 2017. So if we don't learn from that, I don't know where we're going. But also, you know, I think I've said before, in my day job, I work in an advice centre, legal advice centre, and the policies that were espoused in 2017 and 2019 are what is needed now. So we can't go back to that kind of bland centrism. We're not in the same era, and we should learn from that.
David, do you agree with it that it's bland?
Well, look,
centrism.
I agree with what Ian is saying in this article. I'm just not so sure about the framework he's using to say it with. I mean, for my money, talk of authoritarian liberal elites is Daily Telegraphese. It's a right-wing way of formulating the problem, because the problem is not woke period dramas on the BBC. The problem is the structure of British capitalism itself. If you're historically minded, maybe read books about British society and British economy in the interwar period. The very same constituencies and areas that are having economic problems now in the North and the Midlands were having economic problems then. This is about the relative decline of British capitalism, its inability now to deliver even jobs or prosperity for many people. So, yeah, let's not fall for the right-wing trap of calling them the left behind. Let's call them what they are, the losers in the class war.
Right, so I'm going to move on to this story about spy cops that was in the front page of the Morning Star. I'm going to speak to you, David, first, because you were active in unions, were you, in the 80s?
No, indeed I was. I was active in unions and campaigns in the 80s and the 90s, in precisely the campaigns that were being infiltrated by the state, because I was active in Young CND, I was active in anti-apartheid, and it's astonishing how laid back the new leadership in the Labour Party has been about this. I mean, Keir Starmer is also my contemporary and a veteran of the period. He'll be well aware of the extent of this problem. How Labour can even think about voting for the Spy Cops bill leaves me astonished.
Pamela, what's your...
Yeah, absolutely agree. I was astonished. I mean, it's hard to be astonished these days, but I really was when the party were whipped to abstain on this bill. It's got so many horrendous things in it. It's just really worrying. And coming at a time where the government is attacking activist lawyers, it's a real attack on our kind of democracy, fragile as that is, because it's not just about kind of spying on unions, it's so much more, kind of state rape of women, of the role in what happened in Ireland, of the attacks on lawyers defending people in Ireland and the role of the British state in that. It's got so much that is really horrendous that I cannot believe that we would abstain on such a bill. It's horrendous.
Yeah, we had a discussion on it one show, and it you know, some of the arguments put forward by Starmer are very strange, like that he wouldn't accept amendments because it's covered by the Human Rights Act. Well, I just think, well, why don't you just take the amendment if it's covered by the Human Rights Act? What's wrong with the amendment as well?
We also know, of course, that getting rid of the European human rights legislation is almost top of the Tory rights priority list after Brexit. So even at that level, that guarantee doesn't reassure me.
And I think it's questionable that there are limits on it by the Human Rights Act, because there are only some rights that are absolute, some are qualified, and if there is legislation allowing them, then I doubt that the Human Rights Act would protect it. And as we go on to a later discussion, we can see that the freedom of expression, for example, is not protected in the Labour Party currently. So I have real doubts that the Human Rights Act would act as a correct check and balance on this act.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, if only Labour could talk to a top human rights lawyer about this.
Well, I don't think there is a top human rights lawyer there. That's the problem. Anyway.
No, I get the feeling that because of Starmer's background, people sort of go by what he says, but it's not. You know, it's not who you are. It's what you say or what your argument is, really, isn't it?
Well, I mean, while I didn't know him back in the day, we certainly had mutual friends, and I'm really flabbergasted that anyone who was part of the political milieu we were both part of at that time could actually take their stance on this question. Astonishing.
Yeah, right. We're going to move on to this story that's come out that Marcus Rashford had a phone call from Boris Johnson, and the government will provide free meals. So they've done a U-turn. What comes out of this? Have Labour made a point from this, or the government scored a point? Well, I can't really work out where this goes in terms of PR. What's your view on this, David?
Astonishingly flat-footed from Boris Johnson, isn't it? I mean, never fight the inevitable in politics. He always was going to cave in. Why he endured weeks of bad publicity for doing so just doesn't seem to stack up to me tactically. Maybe he needs better advisors.
Pamela?
Yeah, I mean, in a grim sort of period, Marcus Rashford, he really is a shining light, isn't he? And the reason for that, I mean, people going hungry, as I said, I work in a legal advice centre. The people going hungry have been going hungry for years. It's not just since COVID. We've had children literally without food in the house. I see parents without food in the cupboard all the time, making a choice between whether to eat or heat their home or pay the rent more usually. And Marcus Rashford, what I really like about what he's done, it's not the normal kind of celebrity stance of, oh, I want to help some poor people. What he's done is kind of given the message that children are all of our responsibility. It's not just the individual parents, it's not just the government, it's all of our responsibilities to raise children. And really, he's espousing socialist policies. And when he said, this makes me proud to be British, I thought, yes, that's what we want, not what's being said in the Labour Party about what it means to be nationalistic or whatever. It's about supporting people, thinking about people who are in that situation because of the system, not because of some failing of parents or that individual. The odds are stacked up against them. So in terms of what this leaves Johnson looking like, well, obviously it leaves him looking like uncaring government as they are. But also, what does it leave Labour looking like? It should have been Labour forcing this, you know, not a footballer, young footballer. I'm glad he has. I think he's done a fantastic job. And the way he's done it is the most important thing about the responsibilities of government and us all.
Right, now we're now going to move on to the story that's going to take up most of the discussion today. And David, what do you what do you think about this? I mean, I'll just tell people this is on page 2 of the Sunday Mirror, so it did actually make the Nationals. It didn't make the Observer, funnily enough. What do you think about this idea of the General Secretary telling members that they can't discuss anything of individual cases, including the former leader being suspended, and showing solidarity with him?
Well, there's an old saying in politics that there are 2 reasons for every political decision. There's the good reason and the real reason. And I think this is a classic example here. I mean, yes, there is a good reason in as far as there is a risk of litigation in the current climate. You know, I can understand that, but obviously the real reason is to stifle discussion about the suspension of the man who's led Labour for the last 5 years. And that is of no little concern to activists, I would conjecture.
I'm going to thank you for coming along, David. We're going to move, Dave. We're going to move on to Pamela now to talk about this, because Pamela, you've had a personal experience of this issue of being stopped from discussing a motion supporting.
Yes.
Jeremy Corbyn.
I'm a member in Harrow West, and a member of the constituency has put forward the CLPD motion, which many of you will see, and it really says nothing about the suspension of anybody. It's really just a general message of support to the former leader of the party. It really is very nothing in it at all that could be construed as being at odds with any party rules. And we've been told that it can't go forward. Now, this is a real worry to me, because increasingly we're having authoritarian rules within the party, and we're supposed to be a democratic party, but we're being told you can't even discuss things. And when you've got a situation when you're being banned from discussing things, it's a real worry. So we've mentioned the Human Rights Act. Well, Article 10 of the Human Rights Act gives you freedom of expression. And the freedom of expression is not just in respect of things that are positive, it's also you have a freedom to express things that are quite negative. So I have this book here on the Human Rights Act, and what it says in part of it in relation to Article 10 is that freedom of expression is applicable not only to information or ideas that are favourably received, but also those regarded as offensive or might shock or disturb people. Now, why is that important? Well, the author of that book is no other than Keir Starmer. So has Keir Starmer decided that Article 10 no longer applies? The Labour Party were responsible for the Human Rights Act, for introducing it, and we seem to be abandoning it. So I do think we need to take this up as an issue, because it's the start of a really worrying trend. So really we have to do something about this. So I think certainly I've been talking to people about getting kind of a template of legal advice about how this breaches your rights to freedom of speech, and we certainly need to tackle this. So it's a very worrying move in the party. I'd also say I had advocated previously, when I applied to be the General Secretary, that this should be an elected post, and I think this highlights it even more, that the General Secretary should be accountable to the members. And if they can ban members from discussing this, they could ban motions calling for the General Secretary to be an elected position. So we really need to take this up and deal with it. But be careful, everybody. We don't want people getting suspended. We need to take advice about the best way to do this. And there are people working on this currently. Right.
Now, I just wanted to read out the email that was sent, some of the email. It's a very boring email, so I don't want to bore everyone to tears, but this is what was sent by the General Secretary. I'm aware of the considerable strength of feeling and the range of views that members will have about the suspension pending investigation of Jeremy Corbyn MP. I love the formality of calling him MP. However, I must remind you that in accordance with the instructions of my predecessor, which I fully agree with, it is not competent business for CLPs, branches and any other party units to have discussions about or pass motions in relation to any aspect of individual disciplinary cases. This is necessary in order to protect the integrity of our processes and to ensure that cases can be investigated and determined confidentially. As leaders in your CLPs and branches, the party is relying on you to ensure that meetings are conducted in accordance with our rules and guidance and in the spirit of creating an open and welcoming environment for people of all communities and backgrounds. Very important point to make there. I must emphasise that the party will not hesitate to take appropriate action, including against individual members where our rules and guidance are not adhered to or standards of behaviour fall below that which we expect. So that was what the General Secretary wrote. Now I'm going to bring in Rhiann, who is a member in Ealing and also is on the London Labour
Regional Executive Committee.
Regional Executive. So what happened to you? You were in a Zoom meeting where a motion was coming up in the business supporting Jeremy Corbyn. What happened there?
Well, we had a motion from Unite, the union, supporting Jeremy Corbyn and raising concerns about his suspension and calling for unity in the party as a way forward. Now, we proceeded with that motion. The regional chair ruled the motion in order, which I think is very important. I'm happy to speak on the so-called legality of having these motions or not. There was a challenge to the chair for discussing the motion. That challenge failed. And came well short of the 2/3 needed to challenge the regional chair, who I add is elected. We proceeded to our discussion as a regional board and found at the end that the regional director had taken the voting apparatus away, so as we couldn't vote on the motion, which it was quite clear by that point was going to pass.
Wow. So what's your next plan on this then?
Well, I think the important things to note from this are that one, the motion was ruled in by the regional chair, and I'm a lawyer by background as well. I've gone through the rules very carefully. There are two sources of power in our party, the NEC and the rule book. Nothing in the guidance that has been sent out by the General Secretary cites any rules or any powers that he's been lent by the NEC. It's not an instruction. It's the best it can be is a request. And I think we, as members, when we're facing things like this, we have to remember that people are using these bureaucratic methods, what we all call stitch-ups, because there is a huge reservoir of support for Jeremy Corbyn in the Labour Party. And the only way to stifle that discussion or stop his support is to take out these undemocratic means. And there's a wider point beyond this. The regional boards in London, I think there are something like 100,000 Labour Party members in London, something like 20%, or there were. And we are elected. The regional chair is elected, the vice chair is elected. The regional director is not elected and is meant to be a servant of the party. He or she should never interfere with a democratically elected body's business. And it's as simple as that. And, I'd urge people to carry on putting their motions in and showing what support they can for Jeremy Corbyn.
Okay, look, I've got about 10 people who've had this experience, and I want to everyone to see this, how this is affecting the whole country of Labour supporters and members. And also, I think that this support for Jeremy Corbyn has not been broadcast deliberately. I believe, for example, Labour List would do a survey on what a member's views on Remain or Leave during Brexit. I haven't seen Labour List do a survey on what a Labour member's views on Jeremy Corbyn's suspension. I think there has been a silencing of what Labour members feel about this. So I'm moving on to Shipley in Yorkshire, where I have done a show once or twice. Neil, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. So yeah, thanks. I was at the show, Crispin. So
Thank you.
go.
Was it good?
Yeah, it was great.
Okay.
So just say Shipley CLP had a meeting on Friday night. There are a couple of motions round the issue. It was, the chair then sort of said stuff about the email from the general secretary, and that was it. I managed to make a point about this idea that it's not me or another individual member's case. It's the ex-leader of the Labour Party. The first thing I saw discussing, telling me that Corbyn had been suspended was a tweet from Harriet Harman. The discussion about this issue is all over the place. The only people who aren't being allowed to express their feelings in a formal way, in a way through our democratic structures, are Labour Party members, and it's outrageous. I feel it's undemocratic. I think I got invited to this because I posted something in a national group, and I think Crispin must have seen it. But my point really was, I think the idea that we keep going back with motions is a really good one. And I think one thing we need to know is what CLPs have passed motions. So I think that if I could go to our, or comrades could go to our next meeting and say 10 other CLPs have already passed motions, this is some legal advice, then that would really strengthen our hand. During the meeting as well, somebody on Zoom was, raising what's happening about the emergency motions, and he got an offensive message just to him from somebody on the right. So there's awful stuff going on. So yeah, that's all I want to say really. And just the fact that, from my point of view, the most anti-racist political leader in Britain there's ever been is being tagged as a racist is, it seems Orwellian to me. So that we need to challenge.
It would be natural for members to want to show support for a leader that they were behind in the last general election, and many were inspired to join the party because of. To actually think that that's not something that they should be doing, or to block it in some way, is just unbelievable. I mean, it's just going to cause massive anger and more people thinking they should leave, or this isn't the place to be. Andy, are you there in Torbay?
Hi, yes. We had an executive committee meeting last week where a motion was put forward concerning Jeremy's suspension. It was agreed at the executive to put it to an all members meeting, which is happening this coming Thursday. In the meantime, we've had, myself and our secretary have had an email from the regional director, Phil Gaskin, basically telling us that we can't discuss it, and the implication being that there will be all manner of hell to pay if we do. And like everybody else, I'm finding it increasingly difficult to justify the interference of unelected regional officials in CLP business. I'd love to chart a path forward that isn't going to put people in danger of suspension, but I don't see one. I think if we do go ahead on Thursday, myself and Ken, our secretary, may be in danger of suspension, and that may be what they're looking for. But I think it's quite instructive to me that this is the first time we as a CLP have heard from our regional director in I don't know how long. Everything else that's gone on, didn't even hear from him during the general election. And this is the first time he's been prompted into action. And I just find it difficult to accept that, as I say, an unelected bureaucrat can tell the membership what to do. The Socialist Campaign Group have issued an open letter. MPs are tweeting. It seems that everybody is allowed to have a comment on it, the leader, the deputy leader, but ordinary rank and file members in the constituencies are being almost bullied into silence, and I find that appalling.
Thank you. That's very good timing. Esther in Bristol, northwest, isn't it?
Yes, it's northwest. So we were due to have a meeting on Friday, which unfortunately didn't go ahead due to a technical glitch. But the meeting was due to start at 7, and at 6 o'clock, the chair had a somewhat threatening email from the regional office from Phil Gaskin. This is a part of it. I'll try to read it in his voice. If the chair insists on bringing this motion forward, despite this clear instruction, we will not hesitate to investigate any consequence rule breach under the rulebook. We trust this won't be necessary and would encourage the chair to reflect accordingly on the clear instructions issued by the General Secretary in this regard. So we had this email. We were going ahead with the meeting anyway, and we will be rescheduling it for next Friday. And picking up on what Pamela said about the EHRC, it's my view actually that the leader of the party and the party are in breach of the Human Rights Act. Some of us believe that the General Secretary may have acted beyond his powers in suspending Jeremy Corbyn. There's been some discussion in the chat that actually, well, does he have delegated power to just go ahead and suspend anybody? And even if he did have delegated powers to suspend, it was probably illegal anyway in the light of Article 10. So we feel conflicted at handing down instructions from national and regional HQ that we can't discuss the suspension, even it's about the principle and the legality of the thing. And furthermore, the public announcements about the suspension by the leader of the party were themselves contrary to the guidance that individual suspensions shouldn't be discussed. He couldn't have discussed it more publicly than he did, and he had his own little media kangaroo court. As socialists, we don't believe that there's one rule for the bosses, the General Secretary and the leader of the party, and another for us members. We know that secretaries and chairs across the land are forbidding or trying to forbid discussion on the suspension or reinstatement of Jeremy Corbyn. However, even if the chair were to rule a motion out of order, the meeting could, as has already been referenced, vote 2/3 in favour of the debate, and then the debate would have to take place. Where then would the chair and the secretary stand with regard to compliance or not with the instructions of the General Secretary? So it does seem to me that the General Secretary and the leader, and we need to decide what to do about this, are promoting a culture of silence and absolute control in order that they are not challenged about any lack of compliance themselves with either the rule book or the law. It's extremely unhealthy. The General Secretary referred in his email to a need to change the culture and to start work on it straight away. Well, is this the culture he intends to promote? And well, and if so, what are we going to do about it? Because as members, we have just as much a voice as the leader, or indeed more of a voice than the bureaucrats who are there to serve us.
Okay, I'm going to move on. Thank you, Esther. That's fantastic points you've made. Yvonne is in Nelson. Are you there, Yvonne?
Yes, sorry, just trying to unmute. We got in early. The suspension happened on Thursday. We had an all members meeting on Friday, so we got in pretty early on it. Our motion, I mean, Russell wrote it, focused on the fact that they had acted outside of the Labour Party rules in being quite unilateral in doing the suspension. We sent it Monday morning. On Wednesday, I got a reply saying that it was being ruled out of order because it wasn't a competent business. I replied, so I'm waiting to get suspended any minute. And my reply, it came from Rebecca Child at the General Secretary's office. We did it straight to the General Secretary, the leader and the deputy leader. But I replied to her and said, thank you for your reply. However, I think you may have misunderstood the purpose of this motion, which, although using one as an example, is not in any way meant to prejudice an individual case. Just for clarity, can you please confirm that the NEC will discuss the main points of the motion, which are that due process should be followed. Previous failures in this area were actually highlighted in the EHRC report, and so the motion actually supports its findings, and that it is any member's absolute right to discuss the findings of the EHRC report and media coverage of the issues contained within. That was last Wednesday. I've had no response to that at all, so I'm waiting for my suspension to come through any minute.
Do you think you get suspended for it?
It wouldn't surprise me. Wouldn't surprise me. I don't know if you got any to say.
Just, I think obviously ours happened before the motion was passed before the David Evans email. But our motion also made clear that we support the recommendations in the EHRC report and should be implemented as quickly as possible. And Jeremy Corbyn should be reinstated because rules were due process and correct procedure was not followed. So we'll obviously they said the NEC are not discussing, can't discuss any individual cases because it's not competent motions. But I think the point is how to get round it. We need to submit motions, even if they don't mention Jeremy Corbyn, about due process, about discussing the issues involved, that it's our rights, I think, to show whether they get discussed by the NEC is irrelevant. I think it's showing our support and that we're not happy is the point.
Right. Well, thank you both for coming on. I can see one of your faces in full and the other I can only see nose upwards. But
I'm very short.
Thank you for coming on. And we have Christine in Dwyfor Meronid. Are you there, Christine?
Yeah, hi, Crispin. Yeah,
I got that wrong, probably. But could you tell us what's happened with you? Because you've had a different thing happen to you for anyone else.
Yeah, I have. Thanks, Crispin. For everybody, I'm the secretary of Dwyfor Meirionnydd CLP. I'm also an executive committee member of Welsh Labour representing Mid and West Wales. On Thursday, we had an executive meeting already booked in when the suspension happened. So at our executive meeting, because our next CLP meeting isn't due until the 5th of December, we're quite a rural constituency, the executive moved an emergency motion, basically asking for the lifting of the suspension of Jeremy Corbyn and asking for an inquiry into how the decision to suspend him had happened because it didn't look like due process had been followed, etc. We agreed at that meeting that as secretary I would send it not to the General Secretary but to every single NEC member so they received it in their mailbox. And also for transparency and because we were worried that members in our CLP were sitting there worried, really concerned with what was happening to their party, that we would send that motion out to every single one of our members. So that's what we agreed. On Sunday, that's the 1st, I sent it to every National Executive Committee member and I sent it to all of our members. On the 2nd, I received a response from the General Secretary's office. It had been passed to them by a Unison NEC member, told that he was not competent business, which we will deal with. But on the 4th, and this is the interesting thing, I received an email from the Governance and Legal Unit, and I'll read you the email that I received. Dear Christine, it has been brought to our attention that a communication has been sent to the Dwyfor Meirionnydd Constituency Labour Party from your Organise account. This communication has been found to go beyond what access to the membership list is granted for. All communications sent out by officers of a CLP are to inform members of future and current events, as well as meetings that might be coming up. It is prohibited for CLP officers to communicate their opinions on any subject. In addition, it is not appropriate to update members about ongoing disciplinary cases or to give opinions on it. The party has therefore suspended your access to organise as well as Members' Centre. You should also be reminded that individual disciplinary cases are confidential and are therefore not competent business for discussion. Please be warned that any future communications, such as this one mentioned, may result in further action being taken. Kind regards, Governance and Legal Unit. Effectively, they have stopped me from being the elected secretary of Dwyfel Meirionydd, as I am now unable to do my job. But this email itself is very problematic, and I'm obviously challenging it. You know, if you think of any disciplinary process, this gives no length, so it doesn't tell me how long the suspension is. It does give me no appeals process. It doesn't lay down what rules I've broken, and it doesn't show me which, you know, it doesn't give me the rules at all, the guidelines, and it's also very threatening. Now, if you think in the last few weeks, we've had Harriet Harman send out an email to all members in the middle of a ballot, where she gave her own opinion. She was asked to apologise, but I don't think she's had organised removed from her. In Wales, we had Lyned Morgan also get involved in the election for the National Executive Committee of Welsh Labour. No action was taken. I've written, obviously, back to the Governance and Legal Unit, asking for questions, the kind of questions I've listed here. Unfortunately, Fraser Welsh is on holiday till Monday, so I don't expect he'll even look at it till Monday. I mean, obviously, I'm very angry. My executive are very angry. Their initial reaction was to shut the CLP down and do nothing until they ask us to do things. We have to, for example, select a prospective Senedd candidate. We've got the Senedd elections coming up. But that would mean we wouldn't be able to elect anybody to conference, to Welsh Labour conference. So a fairly left-leaning CLP would effectively be silenced. And I'm not going to have that. We will continue to operate as a CLP. But we have got to learn from this. In terms of the way that I look at it, the management of the Labour Party are acting like a bad employer would act. I've been a union organiser for 20 years and they're acting like a bad employer. And what would we do with a bad employer? We would inoculate our members, so we would tell our members what they can and can't do, but we wouldn't tell them not to do anything, but we would do everything collectively. We'd make sure that everything was collective so they can't pick anybody off. And for me, I think, whilst ever we allow this to be a battle internally, where they can use the processes against us, we're never going to get anywhere. Only the Daily Mirror has picked this up, as Quentin
Crispin.
illustrated.
Right, call me Quentin, but
Sorry, Crispin.
I got the
Crispin.
Welsh wrong. I got the Welsh wrong. You've got every right. Okay.
I do think, sorry, Crispin, I do think that we should be making more noise about this collectively. We've got locked in at the minute, but maybe we should be looking for what happened the other way. We should be looking at every single regional office. Do we go out there and lobby in Jeremy's name? You know, I'm Jeremy, we're all Jeremy. But I think what we need to do is everything needs to be done collective. But I think they will try and manage this via the rule book. And via the rule book, they will beat us in that sense. So I think we need to make more noise. We need to make it that it's more expensive for them to deal with this, as in politically, than not to deal with it, i.e., we have to push them to the point where we are making it so difficult for them that they want it to go away. So I would advocate that we do more than just use internal processes. Yeah, of course we've got to challenge it. Of course we've got to use the HRC report itself in Article 10. We do all of those things, but I think we also need to be making noise as well and trying to get some coverage of this. Otherwise, we will be completely silenced. This is my party. It was my mother's party, my grandparents' party. You know, we actually owe a duty to our communities to protect our party as well. So that's Dwyfel Meirionydd, what's happening in Dwyfel Meirionydd.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Christine. It's fantastic. I'm going to move from Wales to Croydon in South London, or maybe suburb of London. David White, are you there?
I am here. Are you able to hear me?
I am, yeah, I can see you and hear you.
Brilliant, okay. Well, in Croydon Central, we had a motion supporting Jeremy Corbyn and calling for this suspension to be lifted, and it came to our Croydon Central EC. I think the feeling was by most members there that they supported it, but they felt intimidated by the circular that you've read out earlier from the General Secretary. So rather than just refusing it, they've asked me as the chair of the branch from which the member comes who brought this motion to liaise with him to see if we can get another form of wording to get effective discussion. So it's very useful, this meeting today, and I congratulate you, Crispin, and your organisation on calling this. We also have on the agenda for the next GC a motion of no confidence in Keir Starmer as leader and David Evans as General Secretary. So that is one possible way of dealing with the future, but it's a rather, it isn't the ideal one, because a lot of people will feel that they don't want to pass a vote of no confidence. Having heard all the very good discussion earlier, I think two things stand out. First of all, we need to act collectively. We need to engage as many CLPs and branches and trade unions as possible. What for example is being done by Momentum? I haven't heard anything much, or anything at all actually, from Momentum or the CLGA candidates for the NEC, apart from the CLGA ones. We must press them to come out on this, because if there's enough feeling in the party generally, then the leadership will be isolated and won't be able to carry on with what they're doing. So I think that that's the thing. Act, not just react, and make it collective action.
Well, thank you very much for coming on. And I'm going to move to up to North London, to Brent, to Graham. Are you there? Are you there, Graham?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Good to see you. Now, you had a demonstration last week in support of Jeremy. What sort of other ways do you think we could? Do you think we could have another demonstration? Do you think that might be a way to do it, or do you have any other ideas about how we can?
Yeah, I mean, first, thank you, Crispin. I'd like to welcome Jeremy to the Administratively Suspended Club. A badge will be issued to him. He's an old friend of mine. And we need to put this in context. Starmer has declared war in his personal decision to suspend Jeremy. He's declared war not just on Jeremy, but on the left as a whole and on the party. And he's got David Evans, a hatchet man, working for him, a Blairite hatchet man, to try and bully us to stop. So our only response can be total resistance. The protest at the Labour Party HQ on Thursday, perfectly legal, very spirited, and I think we should have them at every regional office. I'd recommend them. More important, we should get every CLP that we can to move an emergency resolution, not just condemning what's happened, but demanding the reinstatement of Jeremy. And that's what we'll be doing here in Brent Central, though of course I'm banned from going to meetings at the moment, and other places. And that's really, really important. But we need to put more pressure on the Socialist Campaign Group to speak out more. They were silent when Chris Williamson was suspended for exactly the same reason as Jeremy, talking about the scale and the exaggeration of anti-Semitism. And we didn't do enough, and most of the Socialist Campaign Group wouldn't actually back Chris. This time we must be united, and there are some Socialist Campaign Group members who have yet to sign up to a campaign to reinstate Jeremy. And I think the other things we must do, wherever there is any attempt by Evans to suspend anyone, we must all come to the support and hold rallies and so forth, massive protests and so on. This is a battle for the whole soul of the Labour Party, as many of the CLP secretaries have been saying this morning. We cannot afford to lose this one. Last week you had Howard Beckett suggesting a deal could be done. There could be a negotiation amongst wise heads. I don't believe Starmer will surrender. We should be putting pressure on my union, Unite, and others to consider withholding money until Jeremy is reinstated. There's some of my ideas, Crispin. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Graham. But we also have with us a man in Liverpool, Phil. Are you there, Phil?
Yes. Hi, Crispin. How are you?
I'm good. Now, Phil, you were suspended. Have you been suspended yet?
No, I've not been suspended.
Oh, sorry, I'll have to mute you. No, I'm only joking.
My
what
fridge has been suspended.
What I was going to say was, you got thrown out of a meeting for having a fridge magnet behind you. Is that right?
Well, the unelected chair of Wavertree CLP said to me, "You have to leave the meeting unless you take the poster behind me down." And I refused to remove it. I pointed out that the poster was inanimate. It didn't have a personal opinion. And so I was excluded from the meeting because of the poster. Since that happened, the fridge has actually gone, it's gone all over the world. And people have sent me fridge magnets from everywhere. I've got a few here. This one, reinstate the Wavertree 4. And I'll put that up there now. There you go.
Wow.
So it's not very magnetic, I'm afraid. And there's another one here which I particularly like. This was sent to me from a comrade in Tower Hamlets, and it's made from metal recycled from an American fighter plane shot down over Hanoi. So it's an anti-imperialist fridge magnet. So I'll put that one up there. Someone has sent me a book called The Wavertree 4 Lobby Their MP. And the Wavertree 4 Lobby Their MP is part of the Ladybird Junior Democracy series designed to introduce primary school children to parliamentary democracy and the concept of freedom of speech. 4 young people from Wavertree write a polite but critical letter to their MP after reading an article she wrote in a newspaper. After getting an unsatisfactory response, the Wavertree 4 decide to go to Parliament to lobby their MP. They are told that if they stop writing critical letters, they can join their MP's team. The 4 then have to decide between joining her team or standing by their principles. That has actually sold out. It was reviewed by Jeremy Corbyn, who described it as an extraordinary read, a fantastic page turner. People have sent me the flag, the Wavertree 4 flag. You can see these all over Wavertree. So we are fighting back against the purge in Wavertree, and solidarity to all of those other comrades who at the moment are having their human rights taken from them.
Okay, well, thank you, Phil. What do you think about this? Our Stand Up for Labour comedians, Patrick. Are you there, Patrick?
Oh, hiya. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, yeah. So look, there's a story in the Sunday Mirror that says Britain is full of over-polite Timothys who can't stop apologising all the time. Research revealed, it says. We're constantly saying sorry, just like comic Ronnie Corbett's famous character in the classic 80s sitcom.
Yeah.
A similar number struggle to say no to friends, family and work colleagues. So are you one of those? Do you keep saying sorry?
Yeah, honestly, Quentin, all the time I'm doing it. Every time, Quentin, I'm just always, when I'm chatting to people, sorry, I mean Crispin, sorry, where did I bloody... Do you know what? Sorry, Quentin. Crispin, I can't believe it. No, do you know what? It's so funny because, you know, Lily, my partner, I'm always like that, where if we're out and about, say if someone accidentally walks into me, you know, they weren't looking, I always say, oh, really sorry, even though it wasn't my fault. And then the same way, if, you know, like when someone's walking through, I open the door for them and then they walk past, I go, thank you. Like, I'll say thank you, even though it was me opening the door for them. And I always do things like that. I've had it where, you know, on the train, someone's walking past and they spill their tea on you. But then I'm always, oh, don't worry about it. Sorry, like this. Once I caught a burglar in the house, Crispin, and I had to apologise to him. I said, I'm really sorry, the back door was locked. I said, listen, I made him a cup of tea while he went to look for if there was any cash in the house. I just said, don't worry about this, mate. You get yourself out and about there. And the most surprising thing about this, did you see it in the article where it said they surveyed thousands of people across Britain, but they said 2/3 2/3 of the people, can you see it there? More than 2/3 of 18 to 24-year-olds and millennials told researchers that they don't have enough me time and they say sorry. And I was like, I have never even met two 18 to 24-year-olds who's ever had a sentence more than, you know, who've ever spoke or even filled out a survey unless it was on TikTok. I mean, where did they find 2/3 of all these 18 to 24-year-olds? It was amazing. And I'm sorry, Crispin, I'm sorry to all the millennials if I've offended anyone.
No, I think have we got any millennials on there? Can you see any? You're looking at it on gallery view?
Let's have a look. Yes, we have. We've got Jonathan Cooper. Jonathan's waving. Alison Carpenter's waving as well. Put your hand down. Mark F's pretending to wave. If this was 1992, I think Jonathan Cooper, I'm just flicking through Crispin. Bridget Benson's touching her hair, but I don't know if she's putting her hand in the air. Let's have a look. Sabrina, possibly. Yvonne and a fella there. Let's have a look. Jean Watson. Sarah Lotherwell would. Sarah would pass. Yes. Ray, I'm having a look. Oh, Shazan and Rob. Shazan and Rob are waving. Pete Taylor Anderson's waving. He looks like he could be in Rage Against the Machine, the band. He could be in. Susie's waving. Suzy B. Suzy Bennett. Don, actually, under 30, aren't you, Don? You fall in that bracket.
I'm 37.
Don, let's hear what Don's got to say. Don, are you a sort of apologetic type of person? Do you say sorry a lot? Oh, by the way, thank you. It's good to hear that I said thank you. I don't know why I said thank you. So, well done for being on Radio 4. When are you on Radio 4?
On the 24th of November, 11 o'clock. So it's called the 13 Million Club. Comedians talk about disability because there's 13 million disabled people in the country. So tune in. I'll be doing 10 minutes of stand-up.
Oh,
nice one, Don.
So are you sorry that you've made yourself famous now? Are you going to say sorry that you're on it, or?
Well, can I just say one thing, Crispin? This article is simply not true. If it was true, then Tony Blair would have apologised for the war in Iraq. So it's simply that I say sorry all the time, but just British people say sorry when it's like out of politeness, but when it comes to something important, we don't really care.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Sorry about that.
That's not a comic point, though. That you should be sorry for that. It's not comic. Suzy, are you sorry for anything?
Oh, some of the situations I've got in by being polite, honestly. I'm terrible. I know you may not think it, but I'm terribly nice. I'm too nice. And years ago, I read that book by Danny Wallace, The Yes Man. Do you remember that? It was made into a film, and he decided he was going to say yes to everything and take opportunities. And I kind of took on that. And now I take gigs that I really shouldn't take. And at the moment, things are a bit sparse and there's not that many gigs. But I was offered a gig on Halloween last Saturday. And they said to me, look, it's going to be a profit share. There's not a flat fee. And I thought, you know what? It'd be nice. I haven't had another gig offered. I'm going to go and do it. It won't be much money, but, you know, Willie decided to drive me. And it was a nice evening. I went to Claire's Accessories and bought these horns because it was Halloween. Thought I'd make the effort. And as it turned out, I done all my finances, and once they got the profit share through, I actually £39.81 out of pocket from doing that gig. So I worked it all out. So if I could go back in time, I would have said no, and I would have just stayed in and watched a horror film. But you know, I do things out of politeness. But the worst thing I've ever done is I got a job as a chugger, you know, the charity muggers. And I was in London, I needed a job, and I just took this job, and I had to stand in the middle of Baker Street with a red jacket with Childline written on it with a clipboard and ask people for their bank details. And it was the worst I've ever felt in my entire life. And it reminded me of that Victoria Wood sketch where she's doing the survey for the mayonnaise. I don't know if you remember it, but she's trying to stop people as they go past and she's going, can I just, and I was like that. And I quit after 2 hours. It was the worst I've ever felt in my life. And I just felt all the shame and people hating me. And I didn't want to do it. And now when I see them in the street, you'd think I'd have empathy for them. But actually, I feel worse because I think you must have some very, very thick skin to be able to do that job, because it was just like, And yeah, do you know what my favourite thing is for my self-esteem, apart from standing in the street, getting people giving me dirty looks? I love it when I'm on Zoom and loads of people leave. That's really good. But I don't think anyone's left for a minute. Oh, Brian McCarthy just left. Thanks, Brian. Yeah. So I'm terribly polite and too kind. And £16.19 I got paid for that gig.
Oh, I'm sorry. You should. Yeah.
And
sorry.
these were £8 in Claire's accessories. £8.
Well, look, thank you for coming on this morning. I know it's early for you. Is it early for you? What time do you normally get up, Suzy?
Me? Oh my God! Well, can I just say, dry shampoo is a wonderful invention, and I must go in a minute because I've got to put trousers on and go to Asda's. I've literally got this on and nothing else. This is the power of Zoom. This is great. Dry shampoo from Asda's.
Thank you, Suzy. Thank you, Don.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you, Patrick.
Nice to see you all. Well done, Don.
Thank you.
Thank
Cheers,
you,
Suzy.
Quentin.
Cheers, everyone.
Thanks for having us, Quentin.
Oh, give it up.
Quentin, get the move.
I've muted you now. Muted you. Right, Rob.
Evening, afternoon.
So yeah, we had a good chat there. We've still got 181. So how many left then? That was 40 left when the humour came in. God, they must love the non-humorous stuff.
Yeah, a lot of activists have no sense of humour, do they? There's no room for anything other than.
I think we need to have humour in order to get through this stuff. It's like it gives you a positive hormone, doesn't it, or some sort?
Three-dimensional.
But you do get. I feel better when I'm laughing. I mean,
yes,
it does feel better. You've written a song called Alice Annie Wilden.
This is an old song because I heard you were doing the Remembrance Sunday. This is a song about a war resister, and I think socialists should be opposed to war. I actually put in a chat. I'm not even sure that wearing a white poppy isn't just letting the militarists define the terms of the debate, because the First World War and its consequences are so much more complicated than just having a 2-minute silence and going, "Oh, it's a shame a lot of soldiers get killed," and now we see it's used to justify support for what we send our boys to do in places like Iraq. So the whole kind of remembrance thing, it's not proper. We don't talk about what we're remembering. It's kind of narrowed down to a very sentimental moment. So I think good socialists have always opposed war. You look at the history of the First World War. Good people like Keir Hardie, Sylvia Pankhurst, Jean Jaurès, Rosa Luxemburg, Karl Liebknecht, they consistently opposed the war. They were right. The First World War was a complete disaster. It was a catastrophe for Europe, and it was run by the fucking upper classes, not by the workers. And it's in the same way that the 2 million people who marched around London in 2003 to say the war would be a catastrophe, Tony, we were right and Tony Blair was wrong. Wars are not. History should teach us war is not a solution. Alice Wilden was a long time feminist, a suffragette, a socialist, and she was a staunch opponent of the war. She's a working class woman in Derby. She got fitted up by the state because they wanted to make an example of somebody.
Okay, well, I'm going to play Alice Annie Wilden.
Yeah. Hard times in Derby, no work for working men. So Alice sells old shirts and boots to bring the money in. So her daughters will be teachers, so things won't stay the same. Alice Annie Wilden, no gravestone holds her name. This is how the world gets changed. Alice Annie Wilden works hard to set things right for a world where women have the vote and men don't have to fight. She knows things don't just happen, it's the system is to blame. Alice Annie Wilden, no gravestone holds her name. This is how the world gets changed. Her house becomes a shelter for young men like her son, brave enough to tell them, I will not hold a gun. It's the ones who give the orders, they're the ones should feel ashamed. Alice Annie Wheeldon, no gravestone holds her name. This is how the world gets changed. So the government sends its agents in to weave a web of lies, a plot to murder Lloyd George, made up by MI5, and she's convicted on false evidence from the criminally insane. Alice Annie Wheeldon, no gravestone holds her name. This is how the world gets changed. This is how the world gets changed. When the war is over, the family get released. No doctor will attend her when she dies. Put a red flag on her coffin, cry teardrops in the rain. Alice Annie Wheeldon, no gravestone holds her name. But this is how the world gets changed. This is how the world gets changed. This is how the world gets changed. Alice Annie Wheeldon. No war.